Welcome to another edition of Write Out Loud. I will be reading Lesson 8 in its entirety called Meet the Dalrymples. Dakota, I thought I told you to get dressed and help your father in the fourth sector. You know how his eyes have been acting up lately. All I need is to get angry phone calls again. You know how much the voice hates when that happens. Aw, Mom, make Austin go. He loves doing that stuff, and at least Dad doesn't bore his head off. Besides, I was going to take Tex for a walk, she replied, as if I don't know how to take myself for a walk. I'm always walking around this place. I know it inside and out. I probably could find my way around here better than any of them blindfolded, but I won't tell them that. Dakota's mom, Lillian, puts her hands on her hips, like she always does when she means business. Ugh, fine. Dakota rolled her eyes. Unclip me from the leash I hate, they insist putting on me. But I go along with it for the treats I get afterwards for, as they put it, being a good boy. And then scamper away, wagging my tail for effect. Being a dog is hard work, but I do what I can to get what I need from them, such as shelter, food, and the occasional belly rub. To be a good sport about not getting to go outside with Dakota, I decide to escort her to her father, my owner, although I'm not one to be owned by anyone who is undoubtedly doing the wrong thing in the fourth sector. He's better suited for the second sector, where the only maintenance that's ever needed there is the occasional mopping and dusting of the machine. But in the fourth sector is the computers. Even I don't fully understand what they all do, but I know enough to not touch the keys for any reason. Harold, on the other hand, knows nothing and therefore must always be watched closely whenever he's sent to clean the fourth sector. Lillian is the leader, even though I've never seen her wear one pair of pants. Don't ask me. I've heard it said the leader wears pants. I wear no pants, so I lead no one but myself, and even then, only when I'm not on a leash. She appointed herself in charge when we first got here after receiving a rather cryptic letter from her rather eccentric uncle, whom everyone assumed died when he went off to fight in the war. He asked his favorite niece to take his place at the factory if she did not hear from him in 7 days. It would mean wherever he went he perished, never to return again. Her children, her husband, and even I felt this move and change of scenery was preposterous. Who was this man who was this man we never met nor heard of, and why were we to simply pack up and move on the basis of some silly letter? Granted, I have no friends or relations the way my owners do, but I had places I liked to frequent. I had routines that were completely interrupted by this move. And what do I have to show for it? Some old, musty factory with no scenery and no place to play that is highly dangerous or just plain dirty. We finally reach the fourth sector and find Harold staring at a wall of knobs and dials and other buttons that each, I'm sure, serve an important function that neither he nor I know a thing about. Strangely enough, Lillian seems to know. I still haven't quite figured out how. Another mystery for another day. If Dakota wasn't here to stop him from what he's always almost about to do, it would be my job to bark and bark at him to get his attention away from touching something. It's so tiring to bark, and I only like to do it when it's absolutely necessary. The possibility of being blown to smithereens because Mr. Nosy wants to know what does this button do makes it absolutely necessary. Hey, Dad, how's it going? Dakota asks, trying to distract him from what she knows he's about to do. Well, daughter, this doohickey here seems to be out of alignment with the others. Or perhaps it's the others that are out of alignment with this one, he replies, furrowing his eyebrows deep in thought. He's unsure of what to do in this situation and sadness begins to creep across his face. I'll never understand why older adults always want to look smart and brave in front of other younger adults, but he does. Oh well, I'll fix it later. He always does this. Dakota and I know best exactly what's coming with more certainty than we know the sun will set this evening. He'll become indecisive, which will lead to anger at himself for being so unsure in front of his daughter until he ultimately decides to do it. What's so fascinating about this situation, besides the fact that we go through this every other day, is that in the same spot with the same doohickey. It's gotten so he's almost convinced me maybe he's right and there is some sort of misalignment going on. But since we haven't been blown to bits yet and living here makes that much more of a possibility than, say, if we lived over a minefield, he's probably wrong. Oh, here we go. He's turned away from the knobs, turns back. He'll do this a few more times. Only now Dakota and I don't wait for it to go too far. For one, because we simply don't have the time, and second, because trying to turn his attention away from what he deems to be the problem at hand can become much more difficult the longer we let him go on. This means I start degrading myself and all dog kind by barking loudly while I stand up on my hind legs as I do what I think Dakota called dancing the first time I ever did it. Humans so easily amused. As is routine around here, he quickly abandons his desire to touch anything and begins to laugh as he watches me barking and dancing around like a complete fool. I do this for a few more minutes, till I know he's been sufficiently entertained, then I stop. Not so much because it's absolutely humiliating, as I'm sure you can imagine it was, but because I am getting old and can't stand on my hind legs for long periods of time like I used to. Good boy, Tex, good boy, he says to me as he pets my head and reaches into his pocket to pull out one of God's greatest creations, the biscuit. Humans take it or leave it, having it only during tea time or as a snack. Me, on the other hand, I swear by them and am willing to humiliate myself daily just to sink my teeth into one. Dad, you do remember Tex is a she, right? Dakota asks her dad. I don't know why she bothers trying to get him to remember that. I'd tell him, but why bother? With a son who has no time for him, he needs to be able to call someone boy. Better me than one of his daughters. Suddenly, an alarm unlike anything I've ever heard before begins blaring, scaring the crap out of all of us. Dakota covered her ears, her face cringing from the blaring as it got louder and louder. Even I couldn't help doing the one thing I suppose dogs are expected to do in moments of crisis. I barked and barked and barked, my barks being drowned out by the alarm. Surprisingly enough, Harold didn't flinch once at the sound. Seeing him not reacting at all to the alarms made me stop barking and look at him sideways in disbelief. It was the first time I had ever seen him take control and know exactly what to do. He grabbed me by the collar and took Dakota by the hand, and we followed him willingly through a door I don't recall ever seeing before. As the door closed behind us, the sound of the alarm was gone, and everything was eerily quiet. What was that? Dakota shouted, not yet fully realizing we were no longer hearing that loud alarm, so she didn't have to shout. Harold grabbed both her hands by the wrist and pulled them away from her ears so she could hear the silence. Oh, whatever that alarm was, I don't think it's good. What do you think, boy? Harold asked me, crouching down to scratch me under my chin. Now, I will admit this is another action humans do towards dogs that I love. Why, what I don't love or understand, however, is why he insists on asking me questions as if I'm going to answer him, as if I speak human. And he's not the only one who has done this. They all have done it at one time or another. They all ask my opinions on things, big and small, and they all get the same response from me. Woof. What is this place, Dad? I've never been in a room like this, Dakota said, looking around now that her ears have stopped hurting from the sound. Oh, you know me, honey. I'm always looking for hidden things, doorways, and passageways. Come on, let's go find your mother. I'm sure she knows what that was and is fast on the case of fixing it. Dakota followed behind him without question. I had my reservations. I followed him before down an unfamiliar passageway he discovered not too long ago, only to discover we happened upon the disposal site for the entire facility. I still can't get the smell out of my nose. Nope, I have no intention of following him ever again. She realizes I'm not following them, and to prove how much I'm not going to, I decide to lay down right where I am. She taps her father on the shoulder and points in my general direction. Come on, boy, Harold says, but I ain't budging. Then he reaches in his pocket, and before the biscuit is in sight, I am up and at his side, wagging my tail like the embarrassment to dog kind that I am. After walking for what didn't seem like forever to me because I was too busy savoring my biscuit, we exited into another sector, the main one actually. I barked the question I'm sure was on Dakota's and my mind. How did you know this passage existed? But it was pointless because I can't talk human and they can't understand dog. Well, that's not 100% true, actually. The dog wants to know how you found this passageway, asked Austin, the strangest human I think I've ever met. He actually does understand me. How does he know what I'm saying when all he can hear is my barking? I do not know, and quite honestly, I don't care to know. Until I met him, I never truly appreciated the separation between human and dog. I like not being understood sometimes, so whenever he's around, I try to keep a low profile and not speak my thoughts. I know what you're thinking. He and I should naturally be the best of friends. Perhaps you missed the part where I said he's strange. It's not just his ability to understand me. Couple that with his inability to communicate effectively with his own kind, and I'd say something just isn't right there. You're too tired, bro. You're too weird, bro, Dakota says to him, but he goes on ignoring her as if she's not even there. I agree with her very astute statement of facts, but I keep my thoughts to myself. Why isn't your mother here? She's always here, Harold began to mumble to himself, pacing back and forth the way he does when things aren't going just as he expects them to. What was that sound? What did I mean? I knew the end of the world would come if we stayed here. Honey, I'm right here, Lillian, his wife and head of the family, shouts from the other side of the sector. She has Charlotte in tow, looking like she just woke up, which is very likely, since that's what she does best. Lillian puts her arms around his shoulder to stop his pacing and reassure him that everything is fine. What was that, Mom? Dakota asks. Who cares? We're all going to be stuck here till we die. What difference does it make if it's of old age or from some freak accident? Charlotte ponders, walking towards her brother, taking him by the arm and leading him to a makeshift seating area comprised of two second-hand couches and a coffee table that's seen better days. Austin will only follow his sister Charlotte to go anywhere near him. Will only allow his sister Charlotte to go anywhere near him. Even if his mother attempts to hug him or touch him, he will start screaming uncontrollably. I told you he was strange. Someone's been messing around down in the control room, and for your information, young lady, we almost did all get killed in some freak accident. That's the second time this week. Lillian whispers to Dakota, the only other person in this god-forsaken place that has some sense. I've read somewhere once that daughters emulate their mothers, or mothers see themselves in their daughters. Either way, Lillian could not have been prouder of at least one of her children, and she considers herself lucky that she was able to produce one good egg, considering the crazy she's had to deal with from her husband and having Austin a few months too early. She blames herself for that, so she lets him get away with being strange. What, you still stuck on the fact that I read? Well, I do. I'll admit that's the one thing Austin is good for. His taste in literature is vast, and whenever I know he's nowhere near his room, I'll sneak in there and skim a few pages of whatever he's left on his desk. Sometimes I get the feeling he knows I do this and will leave particular books just for me because he thinks I would benefit from them. I try not to think about that though, otherwise I might have to give up reading, and I quite enjoy it. When you say someone, what exactly do you mean? My thoughts exactly. I'm not all too happy with the idea of someone else being here that I have to look after, and without realizing it, I begin to I begin to wire my grievances, appreciating my barks being translated. That's so wrong. Only this time the translation doesn't come. We all turn to where Charlotte and Austin are sitting, both of them sharing identical looks of fear on their faces, their eyes growing wider as something approaches us from behind, something that smells absolutely rancid, causing me to move quickly towards them and cower next to them. What is it? Harold, the idiot, asks us. Even his wife took the hint to move when I did and followed suit. Then again, from where we stood, we could see what was approaching, and I'm beginning to think I'd rather be standing with Harold, my back to death. Harold, honey, walk towards me real slow, his wife asked him calmly, as so as not to alarm him. Why? He asked, starting to do as she asked just in time. The thing was finally beginning to come into view as we all gasped upon seeing a tall, slender man who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in years, shielding his eyes from the harsh sun coming through the dirt covered windows where we all currently were. Who are you? Lillian asked the mysterious man, pulling her husband behind her as he turned to see who she was talking to. What are you doing here? Why are you here? The mysterious man asked, holding his head as he swayed back and forth on his feet, moments away from collapsing to the floor. Austin, never one to come to anyone's rescue, moved quickly toward the man and caught him just before he fell, attempting to hold him up on his own around the waist but failing. Finally, Harold stepped from behind his wife and helped his son carry this frail thing to the couch. Now, if it were me, I would have turned him over to the authorities immediately. Who knows who or what this man might be or be carrying in the state he's in. But being I'm just a dog and my vote didn't count when they all decided to take a vote on what to do, his pockets were promptly rifled through as he slept, in an attempt to find some form of identification. All he had on him was a newspaper clipping dated over 1 century ago, about a man who discovered the secret to living forever, then disappeared after he refused to give over the formula on how it's done. The picture of the man looked remarkably like the man who was right now laying on our couch. Austin believed the story and that he was the man the clipping was talking about right away. Lillian had her doubts. Charlotte and Dakota, after discussing it extensively for all of 5 minutes, decided it would not be cool to live that long. Harold was, as I expected him to be, fascinated. The next decision to be made was what to do with him. Should they hold him captive and force him to give them the formula? While none of them claimed to want to use it for themselves, instead realizing that they could sell it for millions of dollars and finally get out of this hellhole we were all living in, I had a feeling a small part of them wanted to use it. Another idea that was thrown out was to see if there might have been a reward for his whereabouts still like it said there was back then in the paper. I didn't like either idea, especially after none of them noticed him waking up. I noticed and I barked to get their attention, but none of them paid me any. Still discussing what to do about this gold mine that walked into their life. I was more concerned about where he'd been all this time and where he was sneaking off to now as he slowly crept away without any of them even noticing. Humans. I decided to follow him, not so much because I wanted him to give me the formula, but because a small part of me was hoping he'd came from someplace far away, and if he went back, maybe he could take me with him. Besides, what could a dog do with the ability to live forever? I'm tired of barking all the time and relying on my ability to make a fool of myself on command for treats. That is no way to live. You're right. That is no way to live, the mysterious man said as he kept walking in a direction I'd never gone before on my own. Wait, did he just hear my thoughts? Yes, dog, I did just hear you. I guess you can say one of the side effects of my formula is the ability to hear everyone's stream of consciousness, he replied, stopping his stride to kneel down to eye level with me, patting me on the head. You see, everyone thinks I ran away because I was being selfish. In fact, I left to find someplace quiet where I couldn't hear everyone's thoughts in my head. What good is living forever if I can't hear myself think? Then again, what good is hearing myself think if I'm all I've got? Have you ever been have you been living here all this time? I asked him. No, not ever since I left. I've moved around a lot. I found this place about 10 years ago and just stayed here. Then all of you showed up. I thought maybe I'd try to be around people again, fill my loneliness. But the closer I got, the more you couldn't handle all the thoughts swirling around their heads. Yeah, I know what you mean. I can't handle the things they say out loud sometimes. That's the Dalrymples for you. But they're harmless, really. Well, dog, I'd love to sit around here and chat with you all day. Honestly, I would, but I think it's time for me to get a move on. You all know too much about me already, he said, standing to continue his journey. Wait, take me with you, I barked at him, much louder than I had intended. Dog, you don't want to go with me. I have no means of caring for myself, let alone you. Look at me, he said, pointing out his shabby clothing, unkempt hair, and the dirt caked into his fingernails. He was right. He did not look nearly as well groomed as I, but any place had to be better than here. Haven't you ever heard of man's best friend? I promise I'll keep my thoughts to a minimum and I'll get my own food too. Come on, man. You need a friend and I need freedom. I'd say we were made for each other, wouldn't you? I asked, whimpering as best I could, really laying it on thick. Okay, okay, I guess it would be all right. But you'll need this first if you're going to stay with me forever, he said, taking out a small vial he had hidden in the sock of his left leg. It was a translucent blue that shimmered as he held it out to me in the light. He took the cap off and beckoned me to lift my head up and open my mouth. I did it without question, licking my chops as I swallowed it down. Hey, you think just because I'm a dog I don't have the same wants and desires as the next human? So, friend, you got any biscuits on you? The end.